The hum of the servers was the anthem of my life. For 15 years, it had been the first thing I heard when I walked into Innovatech and the last thing that echoed in my mind as I left. It was the sound of progress, of data flowing like a digital river, of ideas sparking into existence. My ideas. I was Sophia, and for a decade and a half, this building of glass and steel had been more than a workplace. It was my sanctuary, my playground, my legacy. And at the heart of it all was Project Chimera. Chimera wasn't just code and algorithms. It was a symphony I had been composing for 3 years. It was an AI-driven data synthesis platform designed to predict market trends with an unprecedented 98% accuracy. It didn't just analyze existing data. It learned, it evolved, it anticipated. It could forecast consumer behavior, identify logistical weaknesses in global supply chains, and even model the potential societal impact of new technologies. It was my magnum opus, the culmination of my entire career. I knew its every line of code, every nuance of its learning model, the way a mother knows the cadence of her child's breathing. My team, a tight-knit group of brilliant minds I had personally mentored, called me the Chimera Whisperer. We were on the cusp of a beta launch that was set to not just disrupt the industry, but to redefine it entirely. The shift was subtle at first, a change in the current of the corporate river. Our steadfast, visionary CEO retired, and in his place came Michael. He strode into the company with a blindingly white smile, a wardrobe of tailored suits that cost more than my first car, and a vocabulary peppered with a nauseating amount of Silicon Valley buzzwords. He spoke of synergistic disruption, agile paradigms, and his personal favorite, youthful energy. That was the first red flag. In his introductory all-hands meeting, he stood on the stage, a charismatic demagogue, and spoke of Innovatech's need to be reborn. He wanted to shed the old skin of tradition and embrace a future powered by the digital natives who were born with a smartphone in their hands. I sat in the audience, my 15 years of service suddenly feeling less like a badge of honor and more like a historical artifact. My trusted friend and lead engineer, Olivia, leaned over to me. "Old skin! Does he know our old skin built the entire foundation he's standing on?" she whispered, her voice laced with the same skepticism I felt. I just gave a slight shake of my head, my eyes fixed on Michael. He was all style, no substance, a walking, talking PowerPoint presentation. A week later, Chloe arrived. Michael introduced her to my team as our new innovation consultant. She was young, probably just out of grad school with a trendy haircut, an Instagram feed full of her inspirational quotes, and a portfolio that was heavy on graphic design and light on actual, complex problem-solving. "Chloe is here to bring a fresh perspective," Michael announced, his hand hovering proprietorially on her shoulder. "She's a true disruptor. We need to break things to move forward." I tried to be welcoming. I truly did. I believe in mentorship, in nurturing new talent. I invited Chloe to my office, the walls of which were covered in whiteboards filled with the complex architecture of Chimera. "To understand the project," I began, picking up a marker, "you have to understand the core philosophy. It's not about just processing data, it's about understanding its context, its history, its soul." Chloe barely glanced at the diagrams. She was scrolling through her tablet, a bored expression on her face. "Yeah, it looks a little dense," she interrupted, not unkindly, but with an air of dismissive superiority that set my teeth on edge. "I was thinking we could streamline the UI. Maybe make the loading screen a cool animation of like a brain lighting up. Users connect with visuals. All this back-end stuff, it's a bit dated, don't you think?" Dated? She had called my life's work dated. I explained, patiently, that the back-end stuff was the revolutionary engine that made the entire project viable, that the UI was a secondary concern we would perfect in the final stages. She nodded, a placid smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. Right, the legacy code. I get it." The undermining started in the weekly progress meetings. I would present our data-driven findings, our meticulous testing results, the solid, unglamorous work of building something truly groundbreaking. I would finish, and Michael would turn to Chloe. "Great update, Sophia. Really solid. Chloe, any disruptive thoughts on this?" Chloe would offer them. Her suggestions were almost always cosmetic. "What if the data visualization used a more vibrant color palette? We should be thinking about the brand narrative." Or, I saw an app that uses gamification to encourage user engagement. We should add badges. They were suggestions for an app, not a multi-million-dollar enterprise platform. Yet Michael would latch onto them as if she had just solved quantum physics. Brilliant, Chloe. That's the kind of forward thinking we need. See, Sophia, fresh eyes. My team grew frustrated. They would come to me after the meetings, their faces a mixture of confusion and anger. She wants to add badges. Ryan, my data science prodigy, asked me one afternoon, his voice dripping with disbelief. We're literally modeling predictive economic collapse in emerging markets, and she's worried about the color palette. I tried to shield them, to keep the corporate nonsense away from their real work. I told them to focus on the project, on the code, that the work would speak for itself. But I was beginning to doubt my own words. My authority was being systematically eroded. Requests for resources were being routed through Chloe for her innovation approval. Michael began inviting her to executive briefings on Chimera, meetings I was pointedly not invited to. He said he needed her to translate the technical jargon for the board. I had been presenting to that same board for over a decade. The final, fatal blow came on a Tuesday. It was a sterile, gray morning, the kind that promised nothing and delivered just that. I received a calendar invitation from Michael's assistant for a project restructuring meeting, just the two of us. I walked into his glass-walled office, a fishbowl on the top floor overlooking the city. He didn't ask me to sit. He stood, leaning against his massive oak desk, that practiced, empty smile plastered on his face. Sophia, he started, his tone oozing a false sincerity that made my skin crawl. You've been a pillar of this company for a long time, a real cornerstone. I stood silent. I knew what was coming. I had seen this play out before with other senior colleagues, other cornerstones. But as you know, we're moving in a new direction. A faster, more agile direction. We need to be lean, dynamic. And sometimes that means making difficult decisions about the team structure. He paused, as if for dramatic effect. The market is changing, Sophia. It's a young person's game now. They think differently. They're not bound by the old ways. The condescension was a physical thing, a thick, cloying smoke in the air. The old ways, Michael. You mean experience. You mean building things that are stable, scalable, and actually work. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I mean being adaptable. We need people who can keep up with the pace. People with a longer runway ahead of them. There it was. The unspoken made spoken. I was too old. My runway was too short. Effective immediately, we are eliminating your position as Senior Project Director, he said, the corporate jargon a coward's shield. We appreciate your years of service, of course. Chloe will be taking over as the new lead innovator for Project Chimera. She has the energy to carry it over the finish line. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He was giving my project, my baby, to her. A child who thought its revolutionary core was legacy code, and whose biggest idea was to make the loading screen pretty. A wave of cold fury washed over me, so potent it left me breathless. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him he was a fool, a charlatan who wouldn't know real innovation if it bit him on his perfectly tailored ass. I wanted to list every success, every patent, every dollar I had made for this company. But I didn't. I looked at him, at his smug, self-satisfied face, and I saw the futility of it. He had already made his decision. My 15 years of loyalty, of late nights, of missed family dinners, of pouring my very soul into this company, meant nothing. It had all been erased by a buzzword-spouting fool and his trendy new hire. I see, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I'll clear out my desk. Packing up was a surreal, out-of-body experience. Colleagues I had known for years averted their eyes, whispering in hushed tones. They knew it was a sham. They knew what was being lost. Olivia was the only one who came to me, her eyes blazing with a righteous anger on my behalf. This is bullshit, Sophia, she seethed, helping me place a framed photo of my husband, Daniel, into a cardboard box. Complete and utter bullshit. He's going to run this place into the ground. And Chloe, she's going to butcher Chimera. She doesn't understand its elegance. I know, I said, my voice hollow. But the work will speak for itself, remember. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. She hugged me tightly at the elevator. Don't be a stranger. You're a genius, Sophia. Don't you ever forget that. This isn't the end for you. As I walked out of the Innovatech building for the last time, clutching the box of my professional life, I didn't feel sad. The shock had worn off, replaced by a crystalline, diamond-hard resolve. Michael and Chloe didn't just take my job. They had taken my project, my legacy. They thought my experience was a liability. They thought I was a relic of a bygone era. They thought they could discard me and keep the fruits of my labor. Standing on the pavement, the city lights beginning to blur around me, I made a silent vow. They were wrong. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And they would live to regret the day they underestimated the old skin they had so carelessly shed. They had the shell of Project Chimera, but I had its soul, and I was taking it with me. The drive home was a blur of red taillights and the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers against a sudden downpour that matched the tempest in my soul. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white mountains on a pale landscape. Each traffic light, each stop sign, felt like a personal affront, a delay in my desperate flight from the scene of my own execution. I parked in the driveway of the home Daniel and I had built together, a place of warmth and security, but I couldn't bring myself to turn off the engine. I just sat there, the sound of the rain drumming on the roof a frantic counterpoint to the steady, methodical hum of the engine. The hum of the servers was gone, replaced by this. It was the sound of stillness, of an ending. When I finally walked through the door, soaking wet and hollowed out, Daniel took one look at my face and knew. He didn't ask questions. He simply enveloped me in his arms, his strong, steady presence a shield against the shivering that had started to take hold of me. He was an architect, a man who built things to last, and in that moment, he was rebuilding my foundations without a single word. I finally let go, the silent, furious tears I'd held back in Michael's fishbowl office now flowing freely, soaking the front of his shirt. Later, curled up on the sofa with a blanket wrapped around me and a mug of tea warming my frozen hands, I told him everything. The buzzwords, the condescension, Chloe's vapid suggestions, the final, brutal dismissal. I expected him to be outraged, to curse Michael's name. Instead, he listened with a quiet intensity, his gaze never leaving my face. When I finished, my voice raspy with spent emotion, he reached out and took my hand. "They're fools, Sophia," he said, his voice calm and certain. "But they made one critical mistake. They think they own Chimera because it's on their servers." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "They don't get it. They never did. The project wasn't the code, Soph. The project was you. They didn't own your brain, they only rented it, and the lease is up." His words struck a chord deep inside me. The lease is up. For the next few weeks, I drifted. I was untethered, a ghost in my own life. The relentless drive that had propelled me for 15 years had vanished, leaving a vacuum in its wake. I tried to embrace the freedom. I gardened, pulling weeds with a viciousness that was only slightly therapeutic. I read novels, but the words swam before my eyes, unable to hold my attention. I went for long runs, hopping to physically outpace the thoughts that chased me. But every quiet moment was filled with the ghost of my project. I'd be in the middle of making coffee and would suddenly be struck by a solution to a thorny recursive loop I'd been wrestling with a month ago. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my mind alight with a new idea for optimizing the predictive algorithm, only to remember with a jolt of pain that it wasn't my problem to solve anymore. I ignored most of the calls and texts from former colleagues. I couldn't bear their pity, their awkward condolences. The only person I spoke to was Olivia. She was my lifeline, my spy on the inside. Her updates were a morbidly fascinating cocktail of vindication and horror. "It's a disaster," she said during one of our weekly calls, her voice a low, frustrated hiss. "Chloe is running it into the ground. She calls herself the lead innovator. But all she does is innovate new ways to waste time. Last week, she spent 3 days having the team mock up new logos for the user interface. Logos? We still have a persistent data bottleneck in the pre-processing stage, and she's worried about the damn logo." My hand tightened on my phone. The bottleneck. I knew exactly how to fix that. "Michael is completely snowed," Olivia continued. "She feeds him this garbage about user-centric brand synergy, and he eats it up. He told the board they're pushing the beta launch back by 6 months. He blamed it on the overly complex legacy code you wrote. He said it needed to be fundamentally re-architected for a modern framework. That was the spark. The insult was so profound, so ignorant, it burned through the fog of my grief and lit a fire. My code wasn't legacy. It was elegant. It was efficient. It was the work of a master craftsman, not some relic to be dug up and discarded. They were defiling my work, and worse, they didn't even have the competence to understand what they were destroying. That night, for the first time in a month, I didn't dream of the past. I dreamed of the future. Daniel's words came back to me. The project was you. Chimera was brilliant, but it was a product of its environment. I had been forced to make compromises to fit it into Innovatech's aging infrastructure. I had to navigate layers of bureaucracy, fight for every resource, and justify every decision to committees of people who barely understood the technology. What if I could build it again? From scratch, with no compromises, no legacy systems to accommodate, no buzzword-spewing executives to appease. I could make it better, faster, smarter, more powerful. I got out of bed, the idea thrumming through me like an electric current. I went downstairs to the kitchen, pulled out a fresh legal pad, and began to sketch. The structure took shape under my pen, flowing from my mind with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just fixing the data bottleneck. I was eliminating the entire concept of a bottleneck. I was designing a distributed, asynchronous processing system that was infinitely scalable. I was incorporating a new machine learning model I'd been theorizing about, one that was self-correcting. This wouldn't be Chimera 2. This would be something else entirely. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, I wrote the name at the top of the page. Project Phoenix. It would rise from the ashes of what they had burned. The passion was back, a roaring inferno. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in breathed Phoenix. My office was the kitchen table. My whiteboards were stacks of legal pads. Daniel would come home from work to find me surrounded by diagrams and equations, muttering to myself, a wild, joyful light in my eyes. He just smiled, kept me supplied with coffee, and let me work. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. Phoenix was more than a project. It was a company. I needed a partner, a visionary who had the business savvy and the courage to take on an industry titan like Innovatech. My mind immediately went to James. I had shared a stage with him at a tech conference 2 years prior. He was the CEO of Quantum Leap, a smaller, hungrier competitor that was known for its daring and genuine innovation. While other CEOs spoke in platitudes, James spoke about the real challenges and exhilarating possibilities of technology. He was sharp, insightful, and unlike Michael, he possessed a palpable, authentic passion for the work itself. I remembered him challenging a premise of mine during the panel discussion, not to be contrarian, but with a genuine intellectual curiosity that had impressed me. He was a builder, not just a manager. It was a Hail Mary. He was a busy CEO. I was an unemployed engineer, but I had nothing to lose. I spent an entire afternoon drafting the perfect email. It couldn't sound desperate or vengeful. It had to be confident, professional, and tantalizing. Subject, an opportunity for disruption. Dear Mr. Cameron, we spoke on a panel together at the Digi Tech Conference in 2023. I was the senior project director at Innovatech, leading the Chimera initiative. My tenure there has recently come to an end. I believe Innovatech's primary competitive advantage is about to become their greatest vulnerability. I have developed a next-generation platform that will not only compete with Chimera, but will make it obsolete before it even launches. It is a project that requires a forward-thinking environment, unencumbered by corporate inertia. I believe Quantum Leap may be that environment. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss this with you further. Sincerely, Sophia Evans. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The silence that followed was deafening. 2 days passed. Nothing. I started to feel a familiar dread creep in. Maybe I had been foolish. Maybe my reputation was already tarnished, rewritten by Michael as a disgruntled relic. Then, on the 3rd day, a reply landed in my inbox. Subject, Ray, an opportunity for disruption. Sophia, I remember you. You were the only one on that panel who made any sense. I've been wondering when Innovatech's brain drain would finally hit their most valuable asset. How about coffee? Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the Grindhouse Cafe on Elm Street. My treat. James. The Grindhouse Cafe was deliberately chosen. It was small, independent, miles away from the gleaming corporate campuses. James was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table in the corner, dressed in a simple gray t-shirt and jeans. He looked more like a programmer than a CEO. He stood up and shook my hand firmly. Sophia, thanks for reaching out. I've been hoping I'd get this email. My carefully prepared pitch, my practiced lines, all of it seemed unnecessary. There was no pretense with him. I told him the whole story. I left out the raw emotion, presenting the facts of Michael's mismanagement, Chloe's incompetence, and the strategic flaws they were introducing into Chimera. Then, I pivoted. I didn't give him the technical schematics of Phoenix, but I painted a vivid picture of its capabilities. I described its dynamic architecture, its self-correcting AI, its potential to do for data synthesis what the assembly line did for manufacturing. He listened without interruption, his eyes fixed on me, his coffee growing cold. I spoke for 20 minutes straight, the vision for Phoenix pouring out of me. When I finally finished, my throat was dry. James was silent for a full minute, just looking at me. The air was thick with possibility. My entire future felt balanced on the head of a pin. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and a slow smile spread across his face. I knew it, he said, almost to himself. I knew Chimera was too good for a suit like Michael to truly understand. He sees a product. You see a new paradigm. He leaned forward again, his expression now serious, intense. I've been trying to figure out how to compete with you for the past year. Now I know. He took a deep breath. So here's the thing. I could offer you a job. Director of R&D, you could come work for me. But that's not what this is. This isn't a project I want to acquire. It's a vision I want to invest in. You. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'm not offering you a job, Sophia. I'm offering you a division, your own division. We'll call it Quantum Phoenix. You'll be its president. You get full autonomy. You build your own team, poach whoever you want from that sinking ship you just left. I'll give you the funding, the resources, the back-end support. You just build the future. And in 18 months, we'll take the market that Innovatech thinks is theirs for the taking. He extended his hand, crossed the table. So, what do you say? Let's show them what old skin can really do. I looked at James's outstretched hand, and in that moment, the entire trajectory of my life pivoted. The fog of the past month, the humiliation, the grief, the aimless wandering, evaporated, burned away by the heat of this single, brilliant opportunity. It wasn't just a lifeline, it was a weapon. It was the chance to answer the insult not with words, but with a creation so superior it would cast a shadow over everything Innovatech was trying to do. A quiet, fierce joy, an emotion I hadn't felt in years, bloomed in my chest. I took his hand. His grip was firm, a silent confirmation of the pact we were making. You've got a deal, James, I said, my voice steady and clear. But the division won't be called Quantum Phoenix. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. It will just be Phoenix, I stated. Let them know who's coming for them. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. Phoenix it is. Welcome aboard, Sophia. Try not to burn the whole place down. No promises, I replied. And for the first time since I'd walked out of that glass tower, I felt the genuine, unforced pull of a smile. The first day at Quantum Leap was a study in contrasts. There was no cavernous marble lobby, no pretentious modern art, no hushed, sterile corridors. The place buzzed with an audible energy. It was an open-plan office, slightly chaotic, filled with whiteboards covered in frantic scribbles, desks littered with prototypes and empty coffee cups, and the low thrum of intense, collaborative conversation. It wasn't slick or polished. It was a workshop. It was real. James gave me my keycard and led me to an elevator. Your new home, he said, as the doors opened onto an entire floor that was completely empty. It was a vast, cavernous space with concrete floors, exposed ductwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, including the distant, monolithic tower of Innovatech. A blank canvas. It's all yours, James said, sweeping his arm across the empty space. Power, high-speed fiber, and a direct line to my CFO. Build your lab, build your team, build the future. Just send me a weekly progress report so I can sleep at night. He left me there, alone in the echoing emptiness. I walked to the center of the room, the click of my heels the only sound. I wasn't intimidated by the emptiness. I was inspired by it. This was freedom. No legacy infrastructure, no ingrained bureaucracy, no ghosts of past projects. Just pure, unadulterated potential. I stood by the window, looking at the Innovatech building, a tiny, insignificant speck from this distance. The feeling of being discarded, of being a victim, was completely gone, replaced by the thrilling, terrifying feeling of being a founder. My first task was the most critical, assembling my legion. Phoenix was just an idea, a collection of diagrams on a legal pad. To make it real, I needed the best. I needed my people. I went to a corner, sat on the floor, and made my first call. Olivia answered on the second ring. Sophia, I was just thinking about you. You won't believe the latest idiocy. Liv, I interrupted, a smile in my voice. How attached are you to your job? There was a pause, about as attached as I am to a root canal. Why? I am at my new office, I said, letting the words sink in. It's an entire floor at the Quantum Leap building. James Cameron has given me a blank check to build a new division from the ground up. I am building Phoenix, for real this time. No compromises, no bureaucracy, no Chloe. I need a chief engineer. I need my partner in crime. The silence on the other end of the line was so profound I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard a shaky, indrawn breath. Are you serious? I have never been more serious in my life. I'll be there tomorrow, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I am writing my resignation email right now. I'll title it Good Riddance. One down. My next call was to Ryan, my data science prodigy. He was young, impossibly brilliant, and had the restless energy of a caged animal at Innovatech. He listened to my pitch, his silence punctuated only by the occasional no way. When I finished, he exploded. Are you kidding me? A clean slate? A self-correcting ML model? Without Chloe asking me if the data points can be more sparkly. Sophia, I would follow you into a volcano. I am in. 1,000% in. The dominoes began to fall. I called Matthew, my stoic, unflappable database architect, a man who could make petabytes of information dance. He had been with Innovatech for 12 years and was resistant to change, but his frustration with the new management had reached a boiling point. They asked me to dumb down the database schema so Chloe's new analytics intern could understand it. He told me, his voice a low rumble of disgust. I'll see you on Monday. Next was Isabella, our cybersecurity expert, a woman who thought in firewalls and encryption keys. She saw the move to Quantum Leap not just as a better career opportunity, but as a moral imperative. The way they're gutting Chimera's security protocols to rush the launch is malpractice, she said. I can't have my name on it. Finally, I called Jacob, our head of quality assurance, a man with a preternatural gift for finding the single, fatal flaw in any system. He was a pessimist by trade, but an idealist at heart. The idea of building something right, from the ground up, without having to compromise on quality for the sake of a marketing deadline, was irresistible to him. Within a week, I had my core team. 5 of the most critical minds behind Chimera had simultaneously submitted their resignations at Innovatech. The exodus sent a seismic shockwave through the company. I heard from Olivia that Michael had called an emergency all-hands meeting, where he'd spun a desperate tale about Quantum Leap being an unethical poacher, and assured everyone that the departed team was easily replaceable and that Chimera's progress would be unaffected. We all had a good laugh about that over pizza on the floor of our empty office. The weeks that followed were a blur of glorious, chaotic creation. We were a startup in hyperspeed. Desks and high-powered workstations arrived. We designed our own server architecture, and James's team had it built and installed in record time. We covered acres of whiteboard space with the DNA of Phoenix. The atmosphere was electric, a potent mix of shared purpose, intellectual challenge, and the unifying desire to build something beautiful and revolutionary. I was no longer a manager. I was a leader in the trenches. I coded alongside Ryan, debating the finer points of neural network architecture. I sketched out database schemas with Matthew. I argued with Olivia about system latency and celebrated with Jacob when he failed to break our first stable build of the core engine. We worked 12, sometimes 15-hour days, not because we had to, but because we were completely consumed by the work. We were fueled by caffeine and the sheer joy of creation. It was everything Innovatech wasn't. There were no TPS reports, no mandatory synergy meetings, no executives asking us to dumb it down. Every decision was based on merit and data. When Ryan and I disagreed on an algorithm, we coded both versions, ran a benchmark test, and went with the one that performed better. It was a true meritocracy of ideas. We were moving at a speed that would have given the Innovatech board a collective aneurysm. In 6 weeks, we had designed, architected, and built a functioning, stable core for Phoenix. The same process would have taken 9 months at my old company, bogged down by endless meetings and approvals. Olivia, who still had a few friends on the inside, would occasionally provide updates from the implosion we'd left behind. Michael, in his panic, had hired a team of expensive contractors to try and pick up the pieces of Chimera. But they were facing a predictable problem. They had my code, my old designs, but they didn't have my knowledge. They didn't understand the why. My friend said they spent 2 weeks trying to figure out the memory allocation protocol. Olivia told us during a lunch break, a wicked grin on her face. They thought it was a bug. They didn't realize you designed it that way to handle predictive caching. Chloe told the VPs that you'd left behind a Gordian knot of intentionally obscure code. We all roared with laughter. It wasn't obscure, it was elegant. It was a decade of experience distilled into a solution so tailored they couldn't comprehend it. They were archaeologists trying to fly a spaceship. The day of our first full-scale test was a major milestone. We had built the heart of Phoenix, and it was time to see if it would beat. We loaded it with a massive, complex dataset, global financial transactions from the past decade, and tasked it with a single objective: predict the 2008 market crash based only on the data leading up to it. It was a task Chimera had struggled with, producing results that were only 80% accurate. We gathered around the main monitor as Ryan initiated the sequence. There was no sound but the whirring of the server fans, a new anthem for my new life. Lines of code scrolled down the screen. Processing graphs spiked. For 10 minutes, the system churned, the silence in the room growing heavier with every passing second. And then it was done. On the screen, a stunningly complex and beautiful data visualization bloomed into existence. It showed the web of transactions, the flow of capital, and then, in a cascade of crimson, it pinpointed the exact confluence of factors: the subprime mortgage crisis, the failure of Lehman Brothers, that led to the crash. In the top corner of the screen were 2 numbers. Accuracy, 99.7%. Time to process, 11 minutes and 42 seconds. A collective gasp went through the room, followed by an eruption of cheers. We had done it. In under 3 months, we had built an engine that was not only functional, but was already light years ahead of the project we had spent 3 years on at Innovatech. Olivia grabbed me in a bear hug, lifting me off the ground. Ryan and Matthew were high-fiving, and even the ever-stoic Jacob had a wide, beaming smile on his face. I looked at the screen, at the elegant, glowing representation of our success. This wasn't a cosmetic UI change or a gamified badge. This was truth. This was power. This was the beautiful, complex soul of the machine we had built together. I looked around at the faces of my team, my friends, my rebels, my family, and felt a wave of pride and gratitude so profound it almost brought me to my knees. We weren't just building a company, we were building our vindication. And I knew, with a certainty that resonated in my very bones, that this was only the beginning. We were going to win. The euphoria from our successful test run was a powerful fuel, but we all knew it was the equivalent of building a world-class engine. Now we had to build the car around it. The next year was a testament to the profound difference between a job and a mission. We weren't just collecting paychecks. We were zealots, artisans, and revolutionaries, all rolled into one. The days were long, bleeding into nights, not out of obligation, but out of a shared, obsessive passion to see Phoenix take flight. My leadership style was forged in the crucible of my negative experiences at Innovatech. I vowed to build the antithesis of Michael's regime. We had one guiding principle: the work is all that matters. There were no layers of management. I was the president, but I was also the lead architect, and my door, if I'd had an office with a door, was always open. We instituted a culture of radical transparency. Every team member had access to our financials, our strategy documents, and our investor updates from James. There were no secrets, no corporate speak. We were a single organism, and every cell needed to know what the others were doing. I banned useless meetings. If a problem could be solved with a 5-minute conversation at a whiteboard, it was. If a status update could be an email, it was. Our weekly all-hands was a 15-minute huddle on Monday mornings where we each stated our primary goal for the week. That was it. This radical efficiency allowed us to pour all our energy, all our focus, into the product. Olivia took charge of building an interface that was as elegant as the engine behind it. Haunted by the memory of Chloe's obsession with logos and color palettes, she focused on pure, unadulterated functionality. She and her small team of UI/UX designers, whom she'd recruited from a top gaming company, created a dashboard that was both powerful and breathtakingly intuitive. It allowed users to manipulate vast datasets, run complex simulations, and visualize outcomes with a fluid, tactile grace. It was a precision instrument, not a toy. Meanwhile, Matthew and his team built a database architecture that was a fortress of stability and speed, and Isabella wove a web of security so tight it was a work of art in itself. She was paranoid in the best possible way, anticipating threats we hadn't even considered. We were building a system designed to handle the most sensitive data in the world, and we treated that responsibility with the gravity it deserved. Perhaps the most important cultural pillar we established was our approach to failure. At Innovatech, a significant bug could be a career killer, leading to blame games and CYA emails. At Phoenix, we celebrated them. Every time Jacob and his QA team managed to break something, we'd hold a post-mortem meeting. It wasn't about finding who was at fault. It was about understanding why the failure occurred. The person who wrote the buggy code would lead the meeting, explaining their logic. It was a blameless, ego-free environment focused solely on strengthening the system. It transformed mistakes from sources of shame into valuable lessons, and it made our final product exponentially more robust. News from the outside world, from the crumbling empire of Innovatech, continued to reach us. The Chimera project was in a death spiral. Michael, unable to admit that his hand-picked lead innovator was incompetent and that he'd foolishly driven out his entire core team, had doubled down. He poured millions into hiring a high-priced consulting firm to salvage the project. As we knew they would, the consultants had taken one look at my architecture, declared it too complex for them to understand, and recommended a complete, ground-up rewrite. They were now more than a year behind their original launch date, effectively starting from scratch. Chloe, ever the master of spin, had rebranded herself as a product visionary, spending her time giving interviews to tech blogs about the bold new direction of Chimera and promising revolutionary features that, according to Olivia's sources, existed only on her PowerPoint slides. Innovatech was burning money. And all they had to show for it was a slick marketing campaign for a product that didn't exist. One Tuesday morning, an unexpected wrinkle appeared. Olivia came to me, her expression a mix of excitement and unease. "You need to see this," she said, closing my laptop. "I got an email from a guy named Aaron. He's a senior engineer on the Chimera team." My stomach tightened. What did he want? "He wants out," Olivia said, her eyes wide. "He says the project is a joke, that the management is clueless, and that the whole thing is a time bomb. He says he's a huge admirer of your original work on the project. He wants a job." That wasn't the wrinkle. This was. He says that in exchange for an interview, he's willing to give us their full project roadmap. Their revised timeline, their feature list, their target clients, their internal budget. Everything. The offer hung in the air, a tempting, poisonous fruit. We convened the team. The debate was immediate and intense. Ryan, ever the pragmatist, was all for it. "Are you kidding me? This is a gift from the gods. This is tactical intelligence. We can anticipate their every move. We'd be fools not to take it. Olivia agreed. They drew first blood, Sophia. They humiliated you. They're trying to butcher your work. All's fair in love and corporate warfare. But Matthew, our stoic moral compass, shook his head. It's wrong. It's unethical and it's probably illegal. We're better than that. Our work should speak for itself. We don't need to stoop to their level. Isabella sided with him, pointing out the immense legal risk and the potential damage to our reputation if it ever came out. They all looked to me. It was my call. The vengeful, wounded part of me, the part that still stung from the humiliation of that last day, wanted to take the information. I wanted to see their battle plans so I could crush them more completely. But as I looked around at the brilliant, honorable team we had built, at the incredible machine that was taking shape on our servers, I knew what the right answer was. I had built Phoenix to be the antithesis of Innovatech, not just in its technology, but in its soul. Well, interview him, I announced, my voice firm. If he's a talented engineer who wants to do good work, well, consider hearing him. But we will not, under any circumstances, accept any proprietary information from Innovatech. Tell him the interview is conditional on that. We don't need to know what they're doing. I looked directly at Ryan and Olivia. We win by being faster, smarter, and better. We win by innovating, not by spying. That's who we are. A wave of relief washed over Matthew's face. Ryan, after a moment's thought, nodded in reluctant agreement. He understood. The culture I was building was more important than any single tactical advantage. We interviewed Aaron. He was sharp, talented, and profoundly disillusioned. He passed our rigorous technical tests with flying colors. We hired him based on his own merit, and true to my word, we shut him down immediately the one time he began to talk about Chimera's internal struggles. He quickly became a valuable member of our team, his gratitude for working in a sane, productive environment evident in his incredible work ethic. After 11 months of relentless, focused effort, the day finally came. Phoenix was ready for its first taste of the real world. We decided against a flashy public launch. That was Chloe's style. Ours was quieter, more deliberate, more lethal. James leveraged his considerable network, and we handpicked 5 companies for a private, closed beta. They were a strategic mix, a titan of global logistics, a notoriously aggressive Wall Street hedge fund, a pharmaceutical giant, a major insurance underwriter, and a cutting-edge genomics research firm. Each was a leader in their field, and each had a data analysis problem so complex it was considered almost unsolvable. We installed the system, gave their teams a 2-hour training session, and held our breath. The first few days were quiet. Then the feedback began to trickle in. Then it became a flood. They weren't just impressed, they were stunned. The hedge fund manager, a man famous in the industry for his brutal skepticism, called James directly. "Where the hell did you find this?" He'd barked. "I just used it to identify a market anomaly that's going to make us $100 million by Q2. It's the holy grail of market intelligence." The lead researcher at the pharmaceutical company sent me a tearful email. They had used Phoenix to analyze years of complex genomic data, and in 3 days, it had identified 3 previously unknown protein correlations that were promising new targets for cancer therapy. A process they had estimated would take them 5 years of manual analysis. The feedback was a powerful validation of everything we had worked for. We hadn't just built a product. We had built a tool that was actively changing the world for the better. The true moment of victory, however, arrived on a gray Thursday afternoon. It came not with a bang, but with the quiet ping of an incoming email. It was from James with the subject line, "Checkmate." Attached was a forwarded email chain. The original message was from the CEO of the global logistics company, one of the beta testers. They were also one of Innovatech's oldest and largest clients, a relationship that spanned decades. The CEO's email to James was a glowing, multi-paragraph review of Phoenix, praising its speed, its accuracy, and the incredible foresight it had given them into their own supply chain vulnerabilities. But it was the final sentence, the one James had highlighted in bold, that made my breath catch in my throat. It read, "Jim, This is without a doubt the most powerful analytics tool I have ever seen. Based on this, we will not be renewing our multi-million-dollar data analytics contract with Innovatech next quarter. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss an immediate, full-scale enterprise rollout of Phoenix as soon as possible. I stared at the sentence, reading it over and over. This was it. The first tremor of the earthquake we were about to create. We hadn't just built a better product. We had officially started taking their customers. We had fired the first shot, and it was a direct hit to their bottom line. I leaned back in my chair, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. The game was on. The email from the logistics company wasn't a gunshot. It was the silent, inexorable cracking of a dam. What started as a trickle of interest in Phoenix soon became a torrent. The world of enterprise technology is a surprisingly small, gossipy community, and the story of a major player like Innovatech losing a flagship client to an unknown skunkworks division at Quantum Leap spread like wildfire. Our beta test was no longer private. It was the worst-kept secret in the industry. James was inundated with calls from Fortune 500 CEOs, all wanting to know what this Phoenix was and how they could get a look at it. We were suddenly drinking from a fire hose. We expanded our beta program, cherry-picking clients who would give us the most challenging problems, and strategically, who were currently under contract with Innovatech. The results were always the same. Phoenix would digest their data, and in a matter of hours, deliver insights so profound and valuable that it made whatever solution they were currently using look like a child's abacus. One by one, we began peeling away Innovatech's most lucrative accounts. The fallout on their end was spectacular. Their stock price, which had been stable for years, began a noticeable slide. We heard through the grapevine, mostly from a gleeful Aaron, who was still in touch with his old, miserable colleagues, that a full-blown panic had set in. Michael was facing a boardroom revolt. His entire strategy, built on the twin pillars of his own supposed genius and Chloe's visionary leadership, was crumbling. Their flagship project was a money pit, and now their established revenue streams were under direct assault. Desperate people do desperate things. Instead of admitting defeat or attempting to fix the deep, fundamental problems with Chimera, Michael chose the only path a charlatan knows. He opted for theater. He and Chloe pushed the button on a massive, multi-million-dollar marketing campaign. Billboards with Chloe's face plastered alongside vague, aspirational slogans like "The future is Chimera" appeared in major cities. They sponsored tech podcasts, flooded social media with slickly produced videos, and announced a grand, public launch for Chimera at the industry's most prestigious annual event, the World Technology Symposium and its Innovator of the Year awards ceremony. Their strategy was clear. If you can't win on substance, try to win on spectacle. Create so much hype that perception becomes reality. The announcement that both Chimera and Phoenix were nominated for the symposium's top prize, the Innovator of the Year award, felt like the final, fated scene of a play that had been a year in the making. We were no longer a secret. We were contenders. On the night of the awards, our whole team went. We didn't buy a flashy corporate table at the front. We just took a block of regular seats. We weren't there for the spectacle. We were there to witness the culmination of our work. Walking into the vast, glittering ballroom felt like entering a different universe. The air was thick with perfume, ambition, and the low hum of 1,000 conversations. I saw Michael and Chloe holding court near the stage, surrounded by a sycophantic crowd of journalists and industry hangers-on. Michael, in a tuxedo that was trying too hard, looked strained, the famous smile stretched a little too tight at the corners. Chloe was radiant in a designer gown, soaking up the attention, the very picture of a tech industry ingenue. Our eyes met across the crowded room. For a split second, Michael's smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of something ugly, a mixture of anger and disbelief. He excused himself and began to walk toward me, a shark cutting through the water. Chloe followed in his wake. "Sophia," he said, his voice dripping with condescending bonhomie, "I have to admit, I am surprised to see you here. I didn't realize Quantum Leap let their legacy programmers out for the evening." I refused to take the bait. I smiled, a calm, placid smile that I knew would infuriate him more than any angry retort. "Hello, Michael. It's a big night for innovation. We wouldn't miss it." Chloe looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my simple black dress. "It's so nice that you're getting to see what a real product launch looks like," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "We have a VIP lounge upstairs. I'm sure we could get you a pass if you want to see how the real innovators work." The sheer audacity of it was almost comical. Olivia, standing beside me, looked ready to physically attack her, but I put a calming hand on her arm. "That's very kind of you, Chloe," I said, my voice even. "But I am happy right here with my team. After all, they're the ones who do the real work." Michael's face tightened. "Your team of deserters, you mean? Don't think I don't know what you did. It was a cheap shot. But it doesn't matter. Tonight, the world is going to see the difference between a real enterprise-grade platform and whatever little science project you've cobbled together in your garage." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low hiss. "Enjoy your 15 minutes, Sophia. It's all you're going to get." He turned and strode away, Chloe trailing behind him. My team was buzzing with indignation. "The nerve of that guy," Ryan seethed. I just shook my head. "Don't let him get to you. He's terrified. That's what this is all about." We sat through the ceremony, a long parade of awards for minor achievements. My stomach was a knot of nerves, not because I doubted our work, but because I knew how much this moment meant to the people around me. Finally, the time came. The host, a famous tech journalist, walked to the podium. "And now," she announced, her voice booming through the ballroom, "the moment we've all been waiting for. The award for the 2025 Innovator of the Year. This award recognizes the product, the team, and the vision that has most profoundly pushed our industry forward." The screen behind her lit up with the nominees: a biotech firm, a quantum computing startup, and then, side by side, were the logos. Innovatech's slick, corporate chimera logo and our simple, elegant phoenix flame. The camera cut to a shot of Michael and Chloe at their front row table, both looking impossibly smug and confident for the cameras. Then it cut to me, and I just looked straight ahead, my expression calm. This year, the judges were faced with a difficult choice between the promise of a massive marketing campaign and the proven results of a revolutionary new technology, the host said, a slight, knowing edge in her voice. The room went quiet. I could feel the collective intake of breath. "The winner," she said, tearing open the envelope, "is a project that has, in a few short months, redefined what is possible in data synthesis. It has demonstrated unparalleled power, elegance, and real-world impact. The Innovator of the Year award goes to Project Phoenix from Quantum Leap." For a second, there was a stunned silence. Then our section of the ballroom erupted. My team was on their feet, screaming, cheering, hugging. Olivia was sobbing with joy. Ryan was lifting Jacob into the air. James, sitting a few rows ahead, turned and gave me a huge, beaming grin and a thumbs up. I felt a wave of emotion so powerful it almost buckled my knees. I looked toward the front table. The camera was fixed on Michael's face, and the mask was gone. His jaw was slack, his skin was pale, and his eyes were wide with the blank, uncomprehending shock of a man who had just seen his entire world collapse. Chloe looked like she had been slapped. Someone pushed me toward the aisle. "Go on," Olivia whispered, her voice choked with tears. "Go get your trophy." I walked to the stage, my legs feeling strangely disconnected from my body. The spotlight was a warm, white blindness. I shook the host's hand and accepted the award. It was heavy, solid, real. I stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces, the entire world of technology staring back at me. And I saw him, Michael, staring at me with pure, undiluted hatred. And in that moment, I felt nothing but a kind of calm, final clarity. "Thank you," I began, my voice clear and steady, echoing through the silent hall. "Thank you to the symposium and to the judges. I am accepting this award on behalf of the most brilliant, dedicated, and courageous team I have ever had the privilege to work with." I paused, letting my eyes sweep the room. A little over a year ago, I was told that my ideas were dated, that my experience was a liability. I was told that innovation was a young person's game and that my time was over. I was replaced by someone with youthful energy, and the project I had spent years of my life creating was taken from me. A murmur went through the crowd. No one needed me to say the names. They all knew. They thought they had taken my work, I continued, my voice rising with passion. But they were mistaken. They had only taken an empty shell. The soul of the work, the passion, the deep understanding that comes from decades of dedication, that is not something you can own. That is something you have to earn. True innovation isn't about buzzwords or slick marketing. It isn't about moving fast and breaking things, especially when you don't have the wisdom to know what is worth preserving. True innovation is about rigor. It's about elegance. It's about solving real, complex problems. It's about the relentless pursuit of a better way, a smarter way. I lifted the award. This award is not my vindication. My vindication is the product we built. My vindication is the team that trusted me and followed me into the unknown. Olivia, Ryan, Matthew, Isabella, Jacob, Aaron, and the rest of the Phoenix family. You are the true innovators. So to anyone out there who has ever been told they are too old, too experienced, or too set in their ways to innovate, I want you to know this. Your experience is not a liability, it is your superpower. Your wisdom is not a burden, it is your weapon. Do not let anyone discard you. Do not let anyone tell you that your runway is too short. Go out and build your own runway. Go out and build your own damn sky. I finished with a simple thank you. The ballroom exploded. It wasn't just polite applause, it was a roar. A standing ovation that felt like a tidal wave of validation. As I walked off the stage, I was mobbed. Investors, reporters, CEOs, all wanting to shake my hand. James was the first to reach me, pulling me into a fierce hug. That was the best damn speech I've ever heard, he yelled over the din. Over his shoulder, I caught one last glimpse of the Innovatech table. It was empty. Michael and Chloe hadn't even waited for the ceremony to end. They had slipped out a side door, disappearing into the night, their empire beginning to crumble around them. Later that night, surrounded by my jubilant, laughing team at a loud, crowded bar, I held the heavy, beautiful award in my hands. It wasn't just a trophy. It was a symbol, a testament to the fact that they hadn't just replaced me. They had unleashed me. They had tried to bury me, not knowing that I was a seed. And from the ashes of the career they thought they had destroyed, we had risen. We had won.